Hi, Cherie.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so
I'm
much for
excited for this.
joining me, especially at this time of year. It's a holiday season. It's crazy.
Yeah. Time has like flown by so much for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this whole year has just been a roller coaster. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm really excited to get you on here
Mm.
to talk about some of the developments. But firstly, for anyone that's not familiar with Cherie, where have you been? Would
Where
you
have I been? Like geographically.
Yeah.
Sure.
um, Yeah, look, I was going to do a little intro for you,
Mhm.
but I realize I'm kind of terrible. So I'm just going to say Cherie, for anyone that isn't familiar, is a music tech journalist, founder of Water and Music, which is a newsletter as well as a successful podcast, and has a number of pieces that have been featured in Billboard, Forbes, Rolling Stone, and a number of other places. So that is my very short intro. But tell us about yourself. Tell us what you've been doing. Tell us what you do right now.
Sure. Yeah. So the intro kind of sums it up in terms of what I do. So yeah, I'm a freelance writer. I write for a lot of third-party publications, and I also have my own newsletter and podcast that is monetized on Patreon. So there's a whole like membership around the newsletter and podcast as well. And you're asking where I've been. So as part of my job, I do travel a lot. So I've been to an average of around one conference or like speaking event per month this year. I think like slightly over one. Highlights this year have been India is definitely a highlight. I was there for 2 weeks in Mumbai, specifically in late August and early September. I've been to Europe a bunch this year, so I was in. I spoke to some music business students at Berkeley's Valencia campus in Valencia, Spain, and I was also in Scotland most recently, speaking at a conference in Edinburgh, and I've traveled a bunch around the U.S. So I've been to like Los Angeles, obviously for music, and as well as Nashville. Been to Atlanta, that was last year, and a bunch of other cities, Boston as well in this fall. So yeah, lots of traveling.
Awesome. And I just had to unmute my microphone there for a second. So
Hmm.
I do apologize for that delay. There's a little bit of
No problem.
construction going on upstairs, which is always the way
I
whenever you
see. I
decide to
see.
go live. It's
I definitely understand. So yeah, all good.
excellent. So yeah, look, I really want to pick your brain and get your opinion on, obviously, very well traveled this year, and you've obviously seen different variations of how the industry can work in different countries and things like that. But I know your main focus is on the tech side.
Hmm.
What are some developments or some changes you've seen this year that have got you really excited?
It got me very excited. So let's see. Uh, I guess the first thing that comes to mind. So I spend a lot of my time reading up on not even like music news, just like tech news and seeing what the latest technologies are that are coming up that people in like the general tech and venture capital worlds are excited about, like even before it arrives to music. And one theme that really stood out to me this year that kind of started last year too is people uh, people going beyond hype and actually starting to think in like practical terms around a lot of emerging tech. For instance, I think like there's very little conversation about blockchain this year. People are like intentionally avoiding saying the word like at conferences because they're like, there's no use in talking about this until we actually have something useful, which I find very amusing. Um, and then to get to what I'm excited about, a similar thing has happened in terms of getting past the hype around VR and AR and like virtual mixed reality products and seeing where there's actually opportunity to like build a sustainable business and not just a cool product. That said, I think there's a new um, vocabulary emerging around these virtual concerts that are happening that don't necessarily require you to, wear a virtual reality headset to put on. They can happen in a game. So I think like the thing that really clicked for people in terms of understanding the value of VR was actually Marshmallow's Fortnite concert,
Mm.
which was not a virtual reality concert at all. You could just watch it on your screen on your phone. but it was live streamed in a virtual environment that was far from your traditional concert venue, right? And so I think that definitely clicked for a lot of people and has spurred a lot more additional development in that space. Like, how do we partner with more gaming companies or just any other company that creates this experience for users to like build their own environment? Like Minecraft has hosted 2 of its own festivals at least, which were very like DIY in terms of how even like the venues were built, let alone how like the fans could interact with artists too. So to have like really concrete proof of concept around that this year was very exciting to me. And let's see what else. So this isn't really something that's let's see. So one thing that I guess I'm actually not as excited about, and I am just starting to see like a bit more development around, is the fact that the dominant streaming model is actually super homogenous. So just when I was like making a list of trends before this of like what I think are some of the most important trends of this year in music tech, and one is like general consolidation of streaming services. So like I guess the biggest one in the US would be SiriusXM acquiring Pandora.
Yeah.
Which Pandora was like an early mover and was a leader in streaming for a while, but it like very quickly fell behind as the likes of Spotify and then more recently Apple, et cetera, kept coming to the forefront. But then, so aside from that, you have the landscape where basically the underlying messaging is that the only way for a modern consumer to like pay for music in a way that's like convenient and valuable is just to pay like a monthly subscription that doesn't actually go directly to the artist. It goes to like an intermediary tech company, and it's a very like utilitarian, very utilitarian experience that's actually like more detached from the artist. And so only recently have I started to see people trying to build or promote experiences, I guess, that live on top of that, but encourage more interaction between artists and fans. So for instance, within the last couple of months, you have like all these celebrities giving out phone numbers. You may know about this, right? Like I think it started with Ashton Kutcher. He did it last year. He was like, "Hey guys, I'm gonna spend more time on my phone. Like everyone text me." And then I was like, I've been pleasantly surprised at how many more like artists in particular have done that this year. And all of that like mostly points back to this startup called Community, that is like trying to build a better, I guess, text-based CRM for artists to, reach fans more directly. And I'm seeing a lot more activity around that. So that's something I'm excited about in general, is like more experimentation with alternative models for fans discovering or becoming, fostering deeper connections with artists outside of the very otherwise homogenous streaming environment like Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, even SoundCloud. They're like increasingly looking the same in terms of the types of playlists that they offer. Like every service has their equivalent of Discover Weekly, right? And so these services have even more of a challenge in terms of how to differentiate. So yeah, whether it comes from those like dominant streaming companies right now or from new startups coming up, imagining new consumption experiences that are more interesting and more diverse, that's what I'm excited to see for 2020, or what I hope to see. Yeah,
definitely. And it's so funny, the first time I heard, here's my number, here's my cell, I went, okay, that's not their real cell number that they're walking around with every day.
Of course.
But if you get a message that is personalized and you have them saved in your phone, I mean, Gary Vee as an example as well, I mean, not necessarily directly in the music industry, but definitely got a finger on the pulse in pretty much every industry. He goes, hey, text me and I'll text you back. And people have Gary Vaynerchuk saved in their phone and they're hanging out with their friends and there's a text that says Gary and they're like, oh, I just got a text from Gary. I better check this, see what it is. It's mind-blowing how well it is working. And it's so true. I mean, I've changed my cell number twice in my lifetime. And once was because I moved to another country, of course. And it's very similar to email. People rarely change their main personal email address. Yes, when they change companies, they get a different work email, but they carry that with them. And it's really the same with a cell number. So to be able to capture people's cell numbers and be able to directly message them anytime, wherever they are, I mean, even over email, this is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also definitely relate it in my head to the like very, I guess, in hindsight, amusing concept of like email being the next hot thing, like people building products around newsletters that are like getting venture capital funding. Yeah, so in general, I think this is zooming out more to like social media in general. There's more of a turn towards more like niche social networks and like more focusing on tribes. Like even Facebook, the biggest, most mass market social network in the world right now, is starting to invest more in groups. Like I've seen billboards around, or I've seen a lot of billboards around New York for like Facebook groups, to the point where like groups, to the point where not only are groups like the main component of a lot of people's social feeds now, but like groups actually just like take precedent over the concept of a feed in general, right? Like why would you want to feed when you're in all these groups that are much more targeted and have their, I guess, their own niche specific feeds. So yeah, I think the music industry is definitely, or artists in particular, are still trying to figure out what that looks like in a world where they're very much conditioned to just upload to streaming platforms, try to maximize audience reach from the outset instead of cultivating these niches.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting times. I mean, it's still early stages, but I'm excited to see what happens with it next and how people use it, because obviously there's so much more information that is built into that message. I mean, if you're sending iMessages to people, it's more than just text that's going directly to that number. There's a lot attached to that, such as location and things like that. So while it may be scary to some people, it's kind of exciting the way that you can target this moving forward as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know a lot of people are like using Community already to so yeah, here's the thing. This is, I guess, just like a last comment on the community concept, right? Of like texting people directly. So just as like a quasi experimental thing, I've signed up for a bunch of artists like phone numbers, and I've signed up actually for someone who uses Community like every day and like messages people every day, who's actually working at one of Gary Vee's companies. So I think it's very much like in the similar ethos. But he's the only person I hear from who I've signed up for. Every other artist, I like got an initial welcome email from them being like, hey, thanks for signing up, like add your other info. And maybe because like they don't have an album coming out or they're not on tour or anything, I just haven't gotten a message from them. So like it raised the question of like why. Okay, as an example, there's a artist named Doja Cat who's like coming up in kind of like the hip hop, rap, R&B world. Quite big. I signed up for her number a couple months ago, and I've literally not gotten nothing from her, even though I feel like she's like a really big artist and she does have a lot going on. Like she has all these like videos coming up or like media appearances, but she still, or her team still goes to Instagram to post about that, or they still go to Facebook or Twitter, not to Community. So that raises the question of like what really is the purpose of this, or like which types of artists are really using this, and for those who've signed up but aren't using it, why not? Is it a very just like seasonal or time sensitive thing, and that you only want to text people if you're going to be in their specific city, and not for general like promotion the way you would on an open social platform like Instagram?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it really shouldn't be one-sided. I would not like to I don't want to say subscribe, but technically it is. I don't want to subscribe to my favorite artists and just get every single day them sending me a link to a track from their catalog or whatever. I
of course
some engagement where they say to you, hey, happy holidays. Got any fun plans for the holidays? And then they randomly choose people and respond to them. I think that would create so much more value. And like you said, the whole community system there, a community is not one person going up and talking at everyone.
Yes. Exactly. I think that's the one like weird thing with the naming too, because the texting mechanism, exactly, it's not like fostering like a horizontal community where everyone who signs up can like talk to each other also in some kind of forum. it is still very, it can be bi-directional, but it's like one to one in terms of the nature of the interaction. Like you could have signed up for Doja Cat's number and I would have not known, right? And
Yeah.
um, and so yeah, it's like it's actually quite like it's quite individualized of an experience for now.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get back into our recap of 2019. So we were just talking about community, of course. I know that there's been a number of other tools that have come out that I know that we've both actually had a chance to experiment with as well. But I want to know your opinion on what you think could be next with regards to voice. And yeah, I know that this is.
I'm glad you brought that up because that actually, yeah, no, it's broad, but so I guess so for those who are listening, in case you're interested, / like aren't subscribed already, I have a newsletter coming out tomorrow about a bunch of different predictions that were made about the music industry this year that I think flopped. I had written a piece about like in this format back in 2016, and I decided to like revisit it again this year. And one that I think flopped or like very much, I guess, did not meet expectations is the area of voice. Because, okay, there's a lot of hype at the end of 2018 and a lot of like concrete data published around how many smart speakers are being sold. Like, sales of Amazon Echo have gone through the roof, and, every major tech company has essentially entered the field with their own device, like Google Home. Sonos is quite active in this space. Apple HomePod, not as much, but they're still there, so that there are a lot of options out there. And speaking of, we're talking during the holidays, it was like one of the biggest holiday gifts, understandably. And then also, I think one of the top use cases for smart speakers is to listen to music. It's like one of the top 3, along with just asking about the weather and asking about the news of the day. And so I think a lot of people in music looked at that and said, okay, we really need to pay attention to this. This is really going to drive a lot of streams for us. This is going to change the way music is consumed, maybe even the way it's created or the way it's marketed in terms of, campaigns that people have to come up with. But I really did not see any of that this year. So thinking about like voice and music campaigns, you'll see like the occasional campaign for Amazon Echo devices that feature an artist who's, I guess, acting as an ambassador for the brand, being like, Alexa, listen to Anderson .Paak. He advertised Alexa quite a lot this year, or Alexa, listen to Khalid or something like that. And Amazon Music, they have their, artist picks of the week or of the month or something. So they do have these partnerships, but they really didn't make as much of a splash as maybe people thought they would. Just didn't gain as much buzz. And at some point, people were thinking about like voice SEO. So, how do you optimize the title of your song, or how do you optimize even like the song itself for voice environment? Nothing has really come out of that. If anything, I think voice has actually had an impact on genres that, at least in industry conversations, are considered more like fringe or not really at the center. So like, okay, I think the biggest like voice music story of the year is probably Baby Shark. Like there are tons of videos out there around people requesting about like videos of kids requesting Baby Shark, and it's like dancing like crazy next to their smart speaker, right? That's not really like a mainstream label story, but it is like a big music industry story. I think classical music has been significantly impacted by voice, but people don't really talk about that, at least in the mainstream conversation. So yeah, in terms of what's next, interestingly, I see a lot of people combining, I think for this reason about like a relative lack of development, combining their voice strategy with their podcast strategy. So there have been some interesting, more experimental campaigns this year. For instance, Interscope Records released this like micro podcast series with one of their artists and their label named K-Flay. And it was produced by this person who's like specializing in making music experiences for voice. And they're called micro podcasts because they're only like 5 to 10 minutes or shorter. They're just K-Flay, giving an update from her studio or on tour or wherever she is. And it's optimized for voice in that there's like a specific Alexa skill or whatever other skill on another device that can trigger that. But it is a podcast. It's not, to me, that's a podcast play even more than a voice play. But they're integrating voice just because maybe it makes sense to integrate, a spoken format with people actually speaking to trigger the experience. So I think we'll see a lot of more of those campaigns next year in terms of combining voice strategy with podcast strategy in the context of music. But aside from that, yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure, only because a lot of the things that I predicted or others predicted might have happened just have not come up, really.
What would you like to talk about next? I feel like I could just throw topics at you all day, but I'd love to know, where would you like to take this conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So what else? Okay, I mentioned streaming consolidation earlier, and there's definitely a lot of consolidation, but also, like, interestingly, just still more building activity in the world of distribution. And I think that was a big story this year in terms of, let's see, Spotify attempting direct distribution, but then shutting that down because they realized that was not their forte. STEM, pretty popular distribution platform, going from open to closed to a lot more curated, and in the process essentially booting off like the majority of their artists, and the way that was communicated and executed drew a lot of criticism, which I think is interesting. But I think from the company's perspective, they, I think, have set a precedent or have kind of foreseen what is going to happen in distribution. Because also distribution is a very low margin business. It's like really hard to make money unless you have the scale of a CD Baby or a TuneCore or DistroKid, for example. And so how do you solve that? You either start charging artists more, which maybe artists don't want, or you charge artists more but also provide a lot more hands-on service. So it's essentially like STEM is going the route of being a label services company almost, in terms of like the resources they're providing. And which I think in the case of the people who are involved in that kind of arrangement, it's better for everyone. Like the company hopefully can be more sustainable, and then the artists hopefully get better customer service and better, direct help. But but so there's just like the distribution landscape is super saturated. I expect even more consolidation going into 2020, in part because all of these distribution tools are basically the same, to the point where a lot of it's just competing on price, like some of them are even offering it for free. Like, what is the business model of free distribution? That is still an open question. So that I'm very interested in following in the future. I think there isn't a reason. So I think at some point Spotify would want to get involved with this somehow, or I think it just totally makes sense, if you're thinking from the company's perspective, to be able to handle all parts of the, I guess, of the creation, marketing, and distribution process in music or entertainment in general, to have that all in-house. A lot of people like compare Spotify's future to maybe Netflix's present, in terms of Netflix, truly owning that whole process around a lot of original content. So I think just now the timing isn't good, in part because the norms around distribution definitely cater more to third parties, and to not like Spotify's tool would have just made it another SoundCloud, which I don't think artists wanted. They wanted like better tools for understanding what happens once their music is on all platforms, and it's like they don't want in the aggregate, they don't want exclusivity. So yeah, that'll be an interesting trend to follow. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, it's I've just been sitting back and watching, and it feels like a lot of things that people are doing now, it's an experiment. They do it to see what they will get to benefit from making these changes. So like Spotify, if we let artists upload directly, what maybe we'll have more control over this, we'll have more input. but it turns out it just turned into a lot more work for them, from my understanding anyway. Whereas, the decision with STEM, for me, it makes sense. Yes, it's harsh for a lot of artists that go, oh, now I've got to find a new home for my music. But if you are staying with them, they're now more invested in your music because they're making a little bit more of a margin. It's in their best interest to get that song and put it in front of editorial if they believe in it that much. So I can see the benefits for the artists that did remain and were given an offer, but also for the other artists. I mean, it was a nice way of saying you're probably not going to get anything else out of us other than us putting your music on all the DSPs and in all the stores. So you're better off going to a CD Baby or a DistroKid, who's probably going to give you a better deal, and they serve independent artists. That's what they do. So yeah, I've enjoyed sitting back and watching it. I got access to Spotify's upload feature, uploaded a few releases. I'm sad to see it go, to be honest, because I really liked the whole process and being able to preview and see every detail, how it was going to look in Spotify before the song went live. It was just, for me, it was really beneficial. I mean, I don't feel that there was any extra special treatment because I uploaded directly to them. Definitely not. I just liked how clean the process was. That being said, I can understand why every DSP doesn't do that, because that would be a lot of work for the artist as well.
Oh yes, and also in like the current norms of distribution, yes, like you definitely get a certain kind of like preview or experience with direct uploading to Spotify that you just not get through third party.
Yeah.
But by basically the nature of the industry today and by the demands of where just fans are and where fans want to see artist music, I don't know if like this is consistent with your experience too, but like I've heard that you would have to upload to Spotify directly, and then still use another distributor to distribute everywhere else. And so it just adds another. It's just not as streamlined of a process, arguably. It just adds another step, another party that maybe you don't have as much control over. And so from the artist perspective, it can also just be more tedious. And from what I've heard too, I talked with some like managers who were involved in this too. Like I think what a lot of artists expected through the direct upload tool was also more access to Spotify's team. So like, by uploading directly through Spotify, I would somehow like be prioritized for playlist placement or something, or I would be able to get direct feedback from them. And from my understanding, that didn't really happen, or that there are a lot of artists who like expected that, and like it wasn't any more or less than what they would have gotten anyway from like cold emailing or using one of their Google forms or something. So I think it just added burden for some artists, fell short of expectations in terms of access and the actual added value. And yeah, also from Spotify's, and they have to just do like so much more accounting. They basically have to be SoundCloud without all the problems SoundCloud had around like licensing, royalty accounting, etc., which I don't think they want to get into right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to what you said, it's correct. In my experience, there was no extra special treatment with regards to reaching editorial potentially. What you would do is you would submit the song, and then you would still log out and you would go into Spotify for Artists and do the submission the normal way anyway. So there was no special treatment.
Okay.
It would have been unfair as well because they were only doing the beta testing in the US, I believe. So
I see. Okay. Yeah, with only like a handful, like a couple hundred artists. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, and also what would happen is you would upload the song, it would be set with the release date. You would be able to get the ISRC, for anyone that doesn't know, International Standard Recording Code. And then you could take that and go to your distributor and upload the song to all stores and just uncheck Spotify. And that would be the way around it. So yeah, it's an extra step in the process. I was happy to do it because I wanted to do it for my own curiosity and to see if there were any benefits as such. But yeah, I will just say that the process it flowed very nicely. And what I liked is they had some little Spotify touches in there, which you'd expect. So they would remind you about things, which they're now reminding you in Spotify for Artists. So after you submitted the song and you had uploaded it, you would get an email a few days later. Hey, you haven't submitted it yet. Make sure you submit at least 7 days before release day if you want to have your song go into release radar for all of your followers, and to make sure that editorial have enough time to potentially listen and consider for placement if it fits. So that was a nice touch. I wasn't going to leave it that late, but I wanted to see what they would do. And surely enough, they sent out a nice little reminder email, which I guess any distributors that are watching, that would not be that hard to automate. And that would be a nice touch for your artists. And, can only benefit everyone. I mean, if an artist distributes their music with CD Baby and they forget to submit in Spotify for Artists and CD Baby send them a reminder, how cool if that song gets some editorial features, for an automated email reminder because they forgot.
Interesting. Yeah, that definitely seems doable. And I guess, Spotify is really the only platform that has like that regimented of a schedule. Whereas like with Apple Music or other competitors, it's like slightly, it's not as formalized. Like the Spotify process is like relatively more transparent and more formalized. So yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. So we've touched on voice, we've touched on distribution. I want to ask you about TikTok.
Okay, that was also on my list. That was going to be the next thing, actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, look, I guess, what's your opinion from the user side, and where do you see them moving to next? Because I've heard a lot of rumors, and I'm not sure what to believe and what not, but it seems like they're really branching out to be more than just a social video app.
Okay, let's see where to start. So yeah, I think TikTok. Thinking more historically, a couple years ago now, when Twitter shut down Vine. So Vine used to be like the darling of the music and entertainment industries because like that's where Shawn Mendes got discovered and a lot of other artists, and that's where a lot of songs could go viral. And then Twitter acquired it, and then it like didn't really develop or innovate that much, and then shut down. And I think like there was a 2 years of period where people were like searching for something to fill that gap. Like, what's the next huge vehicle for making music or other like video or other kinds of content go super viral? What's the next platform for like launching stars? I feel like TikTok has like for sure filled that gap, absolutely. And you asked about the users specifically, like what about the users?
Yeah, just your opinion on the actual user experience. I mean, for me, it's just a fun app to look at goofy videos and get entertainment. But I found other people look at it for, inspirational messages. Some people actually use it to discover music. It's crazy.
Yes. I guess that's one interesting part about TikTok, and I think was true with Vine and with a lot of these platforms in general. So like the way that the main feed is curated is like not dependent at all on how many followers a user already has or like on their social graph. It's just like things that I guess TikTok might like think that you find funny. It's just like it's a very different logic of curation on like the homepage that I think people are still trying to understand. It's interesting because like music, I think it's struck such a chord in the music industry because it really like would not exist without music. Like these videos need to have some kind of music or sound to really be enjoyable. So that's an interesting aspect of the user experience. And I recently learned, I think the Washington Post has a really good TikTok account too. And I don't think they're trying to reach the same people that like all these like dancers on TikTok are trying to reach, right? It's like very specific, but it's just so. And for someone like them, I think it's just like a new interesting like creative medium to like show people what's going on behind the scenes in the newsroom, or to communicate certain ideas or like current events. So I think it's interesting how there are all these different scenes that even it's like this already exists on Instagram in terms of these communities existing, but the way TikTok works, it's like actually harder to find those, harder to discover those. They're even more siloed from each other. So there's that. In terms of what's going to happen next, so okay, to zoom out a little bit. Okay, naturally, Spotify dominates a lot of the streaming conversation or the music tech conversation, right? And they're the global market leader in terms of streaming subscriptions, and like, you know, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, TikTok, not really, but like there are all these other streaming services owned by like tech conglomerates that are competing with Spotify. And Spotify is actually like the exception. It's just like Spotify, Tidal, and SoundCloud that are independent, and every other streaming service that is like coming up now that really like matters and is getting users is owned by a tech company that has like a ton of marketing money to pour into it, that has all these other revenue streams that they can lean on aside from music. And TikTok is one example of this. So TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a huge tech conglomerate in China with like tens of thousands of employees, and I guess ByteDance just recently launched a new like audio-based streaming service, music streaming service that they're testing, which I think will end up. This actually, sorry, I'm thinking out loud. This is connected to my point earlier about all streaming services looking the same. So if you look at the early screenshots of ByteDance's music streaming app called Rezo, it basically looks the same as Spotify. Like on the homepage, you have like certain playlists like personalized for you, and then there's like hip hop playlist, mood playlist, genre playlist, etc. It's like really the same thing, which was kind of disappointing. But the one thing that I think they may be working on that will be the main differentiator is some kind of integration with TikTok. So TikTok has integration already with Apple Music. I think if you're a subscriber, any song that's on Apple Music, right, that comes up, you can stream it directly, which is great. But for ByteDance to control that whole experience on its own platform will be a lot more interesting, especially because it is a Chinese company. So the types of songs that they'll have available, let alone promote, I think could look very different. And I'm not sure how that works because TikTok, so TikTok's Chinese version, Douyin, is like they're very separate apps. Very separate like kinds of behaviors just based on where the user base is located. So very different types of content that surface up and become popular. So that's kind of an unanswered question in terms of how a music streaming integration would look different in China versus in the US. But yeah, I think in general, I think every streaming company knows that they have to be better at social. Like they have to be better at social integrations. They have to, speaking of, you know, fostering deeper artist fan connections, just offer more of the added value now that everything is basically the same and is so homogenous now. And ByteDance is in a particularly interesting position to do that given the popularity of TikTok. And we can talk about this too, about the popularity of like more social music experiences in Asia in general, and how that drives a lot of revenue for ByteDance, for companies like Tencent as well in China, and how that will influence the way the streaming landscape there looks different from what we've seen here.
Yeah. It's I would like to talk a little bit more about that, as you said, because obviously it is very different to what we see here in the US. I mean, as far as what I see, it's usually people doing a funny stunt or playing a practical joke on somebody, or you know, sometimes it's tutorials, makeup, beauty, things like that as well.
Yep.
And it's set to music, but I feel like it would be very different, as you said, in Asia, to be very broad. But yeah, I'd love to know sort of what videos people are spending a lot of their time with, and what they look for over there, because I feel like it's going to be a lot different to what we have and what we consume here in the US.
Yeah, so I've only looked a little bit on the Douyin app in China, but my impression is that I think, okay, this is like, to zoom out again, this is like a general trend that I think happens with a lot of platforms in the US especially and in Western markets. So, okay, if we go all the way back to YouTube. So YouTube was founded in like 2000s. The top like most subscribed and most viewed channels for a really long time were just like completely DIY comedians or people giving tutorials or something. Like Ryan Higa, who's like Japanese like comedian from Hawaii, was like the most subscribed, like higher than PewDiePie for a really long time, for like a couple years. But then now if you look at the top subscribed channels, it's all like extremely well produced, like major label content, basically. Like all the highest viewed videos are like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande music videos, right? It's like very little DIY content, if any, on any given day. Instagram kind of followed a similar route where yes, you do have a lot of like DIY accounts, but now it's like definitely overtaken by celebrities, overtaken by a lot of brands that are using the platform, right? So I think TikTok, to an extent, is going in a similar direction in that a lot of the content seems like very well produced to a point where like not everyone can do it. Okay, so example, a couple months ago I was on TikTok and I just like randomly got a lot of videos in my feed of these women in gowns doing backflips on a beach. Like it was very specific, like kind of video.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, one of them was doing a backflip in like stilettos. It must have been like 4 or 5 inches, which is like terrifying to think about. But that's also something that I can't do, right? It's like very showy. Most of them were Caucasian. It's like a very specific like kind of person.
Okay.
Whereas I think in Douyin, my impression is that it was much more just like normal people. The videos are a lot more lo-fi. I guess there's certain aspects of like Chinese humor in particular that maybe like can't be translated to like, you know, English or another Western context. That's not unique to Douyin. That's just like in general, but I saw a lot of that on the app. Yeah, that was my impression. It was like much more, it wasn't as well produced, and that was seen as like a selling point. Like you didn't have to like do these huge backflips or stunts or something. It was just like people being funny in everyday life, which yes, it does exist on TikTok, but I feel like what gets like highlighted a lot are these like very extravagant stunts or movements or something. Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you just can't look away. You know, it hooks you. You go, you know, and the one that always gets me is when you see in the description, it will say, wait for it or wait till the end. And you see the first few seconds and you're about to swipe down to the next video and you go, no, it looks like they're about to do this. I need to see if they actually do.
Yeah. Right.
It gets me every time. I'll admit it. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, different countries, different cultures. I mean, I love seeing when some of them will appear on my feed and it will be somebody cooking and in a way that I've never seen you cook food before, and the ingredients that they're using and how passionate they are about it. And I go, okay, this is cool. I would have never seen this in my life unless I traveled to that part of the world. I would have never seen this with my own eyes, you know. So it's, in a way, it can be educational. It can be an eye opener. It's you know, I don't want to say we as in everyone, but I certainly feel like because of my phone, I have somewhat of a short attention span when I'm in these apps. So it's nice that it's not just cute animals all day and things like that. There's a little bit of variety going in there. And I don't know if that's just me, but yeah, there's a lot more to it than that. And I mean, I love the videos where you see an elderly person and they're the star. You know, their kids have put them on camera and said, tell everyone your favorite story. And there's a million people that have been.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's like anyone can have an audience.
Yes. It's very true. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've talked a little about, well, we've talked a lot, but we've talked about what's some of the developments this year. Do you have any predictions that you would like to share as to what we might see happening next, perhaps even early 2020, next decade?
So I think I laid out a couple like very loose ones in terms of like voice and podcast strategy kind of merging together in terms of like content that comes out. virtual entertainment, now that people understand the concept, being more and more of a thing. I think so. Something that I advocate for in my writing, but I think is actually happening in the music industry, is like blurring with other industries in general. So, like music and gaming companies are encroaching on each other's territory more and more. So, like every major label basically has an esports partnership, for instance, right? Some labels have like esports driven subsidiaries, like labels that are signing artists catering to esports teams. In the other direction, you have game developers like Riot Games, behind League of Legends, launching these whole music groups, like their own K-pop group, hip hop group, to promote the game, but they perform live in person at like their world championships. Like that is like a very significant entertainment play and music play from a gaming company. I think we'll see more and more of that bi-directional collaboration next year for sure. Other predictions. Okay, one thing I was reflecting on this year, and I posed this as a question on Twitter and was surprised at the amount of engagement I got, is increasing amount of ambiguity around who actually runs the music industry. So like you can have a debate around whether that's actually the right question to ask, but there have been a lot of events this year suggesting that some aspect of the music industry runs everyone else. So a lot of people think that like publishers run the industry, or like those who own valuable catalog run the industry, dictate how much artists get paid. I think the best example of this is Downtown Music Holdings acquiring CD Baby, which I thought was interesting, right? A publisher acquiring one of the biggest independent distributors in the world. Cobalt is continuing to grow, and they started off as a publishing company, but they also own AWOL, which fuels their publishing business. And publishing also, of course, dictates how music is incorporated into games, into films, into any other media. So there's that argument. The whole Scooter Braun, Taylor Swift debate suggests that its managers own the business, right? Because it's managers like Scooter Braun who are arguably in the best position to diversify and to integrate vertically in a way that's more nimble than a lot of other companies, right? So now Scooter Braun isn't just managing talent, he's investing in tech companies. Has his own label for artists on his management roster, and now he owns like a really valuable catalog because he built up all this money. So you can argue that's the managers, or you can argue that it's the tech companies. Like maybe it's like companies like ByteDance that will own the music industry next year, or that will have the most power in terms of, in this case, in terms of owning distribution, like actually controlling the pipes, right, through which music is delivered to the right or the wrong person to listen to. So this is like a very loose-ended prediction, but I just think there'll be more and more of that activity that like challenges our assumptions around where the locus of power actually is. Because I think at like different points in the year you would say, oh yeah, it's like content is king, but wait, no, like tech is actually king, and like distribution is king. Oh, maybe it's both. No, the artist should be king. Like artists are the reason why the industry exists. So this debate will just keep going on, and I think there'll continue to be events that blur the boundaries maybe between all these different players in a way that makes that question more difficult to answer, maybe, of like whether there's actually one person that it's not one person, one sector of the music industry that holds more power or more value, etc., than everything else.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I feel like it's always going to be changing, and everyone's going to have a different opinion. I mean, I saw when you put the question out to everyone and the responses, and people getting really passionate about it, and that convinced that they were correct. And
yes, it is very much influenced by like your immediate, like, of course, if you work at a label, I think you're going to say the label. If you work in a publisher, of course, like you're not going to say tech companies run the industry.
Look, I'd love to say artists. I'd love to say artists run the industry.
Ideally, it's the artists. Yes.
But they still need other people. Not every artist can do 100% themselves. I mean, there's a lot of DIY artists out there, but they still go and pay money to a distributor to distribute their music. I mean, they're still
Yes.
doing everything else themselves pretty much. They'll do their own marketing and things like that. But yeah, everyone relies on somebody else. That's the crazy thing
Sure.
about.
That's true. I guess that's what this points to. It's like the dependencies are like maybe even becoming even more tight knit, maybe to the detriment in the future of one of these companies, right? Like if Spotify were to shut down next year, which I don't think is going to happen at all, but like if they were to shut down, probably like Spotify accounts for, I know like some artists for whom Spotify accounts for 80% of their income. So what happens then, right? Are these users going to go to another streaming service necessarily? Like what are the next steps after that? So yeah, that's a good point. Like their features are much more interlinked to the point where it's like hard to just single out one. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And for all artists, I mean, you shouldn't be putting all of your time and investing everything into one DSP, one store.
Of course.
I mean,
yeah.
Because like we said, you never know what could happen, and you can't always rely on it. You're not always going to get playlist support, editorial support. It's just, you have to accept that. There's going to be times where you put a track out and it just doesn't connect with the audience for whatever reason. So it is important to put your effort and your energy into all of these platforms. And that's why, anytime a new service like TikTok, the second that artists.tiktok.com went online, I signed up immediately. And surely enough, it's now offline for anyone that's going to that website right now. So I'm not sure of the reason exactly, but I feel like there might be something that's coming. But yes, artists.tiktok.com went offline a few weeks ago, I believe. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. Now, also, and Cherie, let me just add your face back in there once again.
Oh,
Cherie.
sorry. Okay, I think because of my phone, every time there's some like emergency alert being pushed and like push notifications, and then every time I like cancel that, for some reason the mic or like the headphones like turn off.
Oh, interesting.
For me, so
hey,
yeah,
it's cool. We're live.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yes.
I was just adding my little bit about TikTok for artists and how as soon as anything like this becomes available, go in there and claim it. It's just like domain names. It's real estate. Sure. You want yourname.com as soon as you can, because the value's most likely going to go up. I mean, if you didn't have cheriehu.com, who knows how much you'd be paying for that right now. I've seen it happen with companies where, it's $800 for myname.com. I don't want to pay that. 2 years later, I had to pay $25,000 to get it because obviously my company's doing really well and they wanted a piece of that. So, it's the same. All these services, go in there. If something similar to TikTok launches tomorrow and there's a music component and you're an artist, just sign up, claim an account. And then you may delete it, but you may come back to it if it gets more popular.
Yeah, definitely. I guess on that note, another thing that I hope to see more of is artists, I guess musicians, experimenting with different ways of telling their story in their music. So I met with an artist, for instance, who makes like pretty good electronic music, but is also really into comics. And he worked with a comic artist to make a comic book around his album that's available only to people who, I guess, like pre-save the album ahead of time, or if you follow him on Spotify. I guess he did a direct partnership with Spotify where he was able to build that, like on the technical side. I know like there's another artist called Umi who released her EP episodically, quote unquote, is how she put it, and she like released a short film that was a hybrid like live action / anime film, like 4 minutes long to go with each song, and then she did that week after week and then dropped the whole EP all at once, and that was super impactful in terms of like driving engagement and just fan interest in her music. So I look forward to seeing more of that, like more interesting ways to experiment with stories more ways of breaking the rules or like breaking the mold of what you normally do. And yeah, TikTok is an interesting way to do that. Although I think part of the value of music that blows up on TikTok is like the more hands-off, decentralized nature of it. Like you never know what's going to go viral. Like I guess the piece of advice that has not changed over the past couple of years is like it's really hard to build a music strategy around virality. Like virality is not a strategy, right? It's if anything, it's like the cherry on top, or maybe a hazard because it could, completely impact or completely change or like alter the marketing plan that you had in place. So, yeah, I feel like TikTok can be good and bad for that reason. But yeah, I guess in short, looking forward to more interesting types of stories that maybe come along with these new formats like virtual entertainment, virtual concerts, voice, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm glad you said that going viral, that can't be your plan.
Yeah.
No, most of the time, I mean, yeah, okay. There's some cases where it was planned, but they didn't know how quickly it was going to happen or at what level it was going to go viral. Whereas most of the time when people go viral, let's say they post a tweet, it's funny, you'll see it, they'll post it, and then they have nothing else to say. They haven't created a product. There's nothing that they have to sell. They're happy that people engaged with their post and appreciated whatever they said or enjoyed their joke, and they weren't ready for it. I mean, obviously, with an artist, it's safe to say that you're prepared that if 100,000 people start following you tomorrow, you've probably got something else for them. You can go live and start playing your music to them now. You've got an audience, so hold on to them while you can. But yeah, it's really funny. Some of the stories that I've seen where people have gone viral and they had no intentions of going viral. They just wanted to make a statement, and now everybody's talking about them and creating hashtags for them, and they're trending. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
You've had a few moments where you've started to go viral. I've seen. I believe there was one.
It was semi-viral. I wouldn't characterize it as like totally viral. What are you thinking of exactly?
I believe it was the one. I could be wrong, but I believe it was the one with the hands clapping, which looks like hands slapping, and it was a playlist is not a marketing plan. Was it that one, or was it?
It was. I don't think there were any claps actually, but it was like playlist placement is an artist development. That tweet.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Yes. I can't remember if that was this year or end of last year, but yeah, that was definitely my most viral. It was a very niche viral moment, which is why I'm like hesitant to call it viral, because it was like viral within, I guess, the artist / like music industry community.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was interesting because that's something I tweeted. I guess I tweeted that, as I do a lot of other tweets, because I like knew it was something people were talking about, but just have not publicly said, even though they all agree on it. And like, it's not gonna ruin anyone's day. It's just like a truth that a lot of people don't realize, like with all the hype around playlisting. I think people actually have less of that. Well, I guess you're deeply involved in the playlist world, so you can probably speak more informally on this. But I feel like there isn't as much hype around the power of playlisting alone to like sustain an artist's career. Like I think there's a lot more awareness, that like playlists are important for driving streams, which drives revenue, so that's important, but it's just one aspect of what should ultimately be a much more well-rounded out marketing plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, every time I speak now, wherever it is, I almost feel like I need to have a disclaimer. I have to go, hey, I'm only going to talk about playlists because that's what I know best, and that's what you came here to hear me talk to you about. But you need to know that should not be your entire marketing plan. You should not base your career on getting on playlists. I'm going to give you as much information as I can, but don't expect to just make a living being on playlists. I mean, it could happen, but there's no guarantees of that. So I'm just going to teach you what I know. And I have to do that whole spiel every time now. And but it's funny because I've had people come up to me and go, what have you got against radio? What have you got against YouTube and music videos? And I go, nothing at all.
Nothing.
It's awesome. You want to talk
Right.
about merchandise? I'm not your guy, but I know how valuable that is. Here's 5 other people that you should talk to about merch and definitely listen to what they have to say. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's it. I mean, everyone needs to know that playlists are not the entire strategy for your release. I mean, they're not even really part of it. It's just you have the work that you have to do and you put aside the time and you do that. And then you go on to the next thing based on your release and you go from there. You don't just submit to a few playlists and sit back and go, well, I'm done.
Right.
By no means.
Because you have basically little to no control over that aspect of marketing. Yeah, it's better to spend a lot more time on things you can control, things where you have full transparency over like how much money is being spent, who you're reaching, like through advertising or just like even on YouTube, and things like that. Yeah.
Very cool. So we've shared some predictions and we've talked about this year. What can you share about what's coming up with you? Because I know this has been, as we mentioned at the start, a bit of a roller coaster of a year. I've seen you traveling all around the world, meeting all kinds of people and speaking at various conferences and events. Is there anything coming up that you can share where people may be able to see or hear from you in 2020?
So this is not an event, but I'm spending much of next year working on a book. So I have an official deal, which is great, for a book about the intersection of music and startup culture. So like how tech entrepreneurship and music entrepreneurship, like independent artists especially, how they've influenced each other and how that impacts pop culture in general, how that impacts the type of music that we see coming out and how it's made and marketed. So I'm spending a lot of time researching that, and I'll post a lot about that in my newsletter, I think, and on my Patreon page as well. I actually don't have any travel until maybe South by Southwest. We'll see. I might be going there. And I'm also probably going to be at this music festival / conference called Tree Fort Music Fest, which is in Boise. I've never been to Idaho at all, so that should be an interesting experience. And I think it's like catered more towards independent artists as well.
Cool.
So yeah, very excited for that. Aside from that, it's the next year is like totally open. I find with a lot of this travel, it's difficult for me to like have a clear idea of where I'm going to be like more than 5-6 months in advance. But I definitely want to travel a lot for my book just to interview people. Like I want to make it as international and global as possible. So I still have to do a little bit of planning around that. Like one, which artists will be willing to speak with me, and then plan around there. So I'll definitely be in LA probably a couple times next year. I hope to go to Europe. Berlin has been like on the top of my bucket list for a really, really long time. And I think I'll be going there towards like the fall, like late summer, early fall. So no exact like date yet, but yeah, in terms of travel, those are the places that come to mind for me. So yeah, aside from that, still writing. Yeah, you can find my work on my newsletter. I'll be on Twitter a lot still. Yeah. So yeah, in many ways, it'll just be a continuation of the work that I've been doing this year.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So in the interest of time, we might start wrapping this up. Otherwise, I know we could talk all day, and I don't. That's never a bad thing, but I do know that we do have a few other things we have to get off and take care of today. I just want to post up some links to your website firstly, so people can, of course, go and check out.
Thank you.
Yeah, because from there it's central. You've got links to, you mentioned the Water and Music podcast and newsletter, links to various pieces that you've written as well. And then social media, is it okay if I put your handle up on the screen here as well?
Of course. Yeah. So it's Cherie Hu 42 for Twitter and Instagram as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. So we've got Cherie Hu 42 on Twitter and Instagram, and all the links and all the information at cheriehu.com. Cherie,
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks
I know
for
how busy
having
you
me.
are.
Yeah.
I feel like every time I see you, it's in another city, and it's just like, oh, hey, Cherie. Without even
That's true.
realizing,
It's always at a
we're
different
in another
conference.
city at the same time. It's just,
Yeah.
you're very well traveled this year. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this is super interesting. I want to revisit this time next year to see, I guess, how on the nose you were or not. I guess we'll find out. Yeah.
Well, if this gets deleted, you'll realize we weren't on the nose. But I'm just kidding. We'll leave it up. We'll leave it up. It's yeah, it's fun. It's fun sharing these predictions and seeing how close you were and where you were surprised as well. So yeah, I look forward to that conversation, and no doubt many more conversations before then as well.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you, Cherie.